right, the meeting has started.
Excellent. Well,
Great.
good afternoon and welcome to the East Bay Regional Park District's Board Finance Committee meeting of August 24th. We're starting the meeting today at 12:36 and pursuant to Governor Newsom's AB 361, as the Brown Act has been amended to where we can hold meetings like this in a hybrid situation. In this case, we're all zooming in, but we want any member of the public to know that they're always welcome to call in and participate. There are a number of ways to call in and participate, and we do have a public comments section, and you're also welcome to comment on any item we have today. Shannon, could you give us an idea of, or the public an idea of how they could communicate with us?
Yes, thank you. So there are three ways to comment. One is via the Zoom meeting. You can raise your participant hand. You can submit an email or leave a voicemail. And all of the information on how to do any of those options is available on the agenda at the Park District website, which is evparks.org. And I would like to begin with calling roll of the committee members. Director Eccles.
Present.
Director Wieskamp.
Here.
And Director Waspy.
Here.
Thank you. And would Assistant General Manager Deborah Ocker introduce the Park District staff, please?
Yes, thank you, Shannon. I'm Deborah Ocker, Assistant General Manager of Finance and Management Services. Today we have with us Assistant Finance Officer Michelle Strawson O'Hara, Assistant Finance Officer Deborah Spalding. We have our Chief Information Officer David Rusting, our Audit Manager David Sumner. Other members of the Finance Department, Budget Manager Christina Crosby, Accounting Manager Kim Balingit, and other staff, additional staff members from Finance and other members of other divisions that I will, I'm not going to name everybody. Thank you for being here.
Excellent. Yes, thank you all for being here. So our first item today is the June 30th, 2022 investment report and portfolio review. Deb, take it on.
All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know how this is working.
That's fine.
And now it's in presentation mode. Is that good?
That looks good.
All right. So I am going to, as usual, give you an overview of our second quarter investment report. And then I'm going to turn it over to Allison County, who is our consultant here from PFM, and she's going to dive into more of the details about the investments and also give you a little bit of a preview of what's happening in the market today. So as I always do, so we're going to walk through, there's a big chart on page 3 of your packet that is a summary of all of our investment balances of all of our different bank accounts. So I'm going to start by walking you through the different chunks, starting with the liquidity portfolio. And those are the funds that are either cash or easily convertible to cash. And the big thing to draw to your attention here is that we get our first big property tax payment of the year in April every year. And so you see this big change in our amount of cash reserves. So if you look at the market value of March 31st, it was 124.6 million. And then as of June 30th, it was at 151 million. So that's reflecting the receipt of the property tax payment. And we get our second big payment in December. So that's just a cycle that happens every year. Now looking a little further down on that same page, page 3, looking at invested funds. So that's our short and mid-term securities. And when Allison gives her presentation, she'll dive more into the details. Like, for example, we have increased investments in US Treasuries. But I'm just going to bring to your attention some big picture, which is that we have increased the amount that we have invested in short and midterm securities by about 10 million over the last year. And that's an effort to earn increased investment earnings on our portfolio, because the cash amount is not earning so much. So getting it into longer term investments helps us earn a little bit more revenue. And then lastly, taking a look at bond funds. So you may recall that we in February sold our most recent tranche of Measure WW bonds, and that was $60 million. And so as of March 31st, that amount was still in cash. It hadn't been invested longer term yet. And so during the last 3 months, PFM has been investing those funds. And so you now see that this midterm securities amount has jumped up to reflect that we now have those funds invested longer term. So that concludes my big picture review of our investment balances at June 30th. And I'm going to turn it over to Allison County, who's here from PFM. After she does her presentation, we'll take questions. And then if we could get a recommendation to the full board, that would be great.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Deb. I'll go ahead here and just pull up the presentation. Get this out of the way. All right. And I'm showing the version that's in the agenda packet, so you should be able to follow along with the page numbers. So I will go ahead and walk through the materials here. As Deb mentioned, I'm providing a brief update.
I think we're not seeing your screen quite yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me stop sharing and try again. Oh, here we go. Okay. I think I forgot to hit share. Okay.
Perfect.
Hey, can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I'll go ahead and kick it off just with a brief economic and interest rate update, kind of highlighting what happened during the quarter ended June 30th. Many of these things are not new. It might sound like I'm repeating myself, or it's the same things you've heard at the last couple quarterly meetings, and particularly when it comes to inflation. The U.S. is still dealing with a very high inflation. As of June 30th, CPI, one of the most common measures of inflation, was 9.1%, meaning year over year from June to June, prices increased 9.1%. That inflation did come down. The CPI reading came down slightly in July to 8.5, but still very elevated, and really a big concern for individuals who are spending more money and the Federal Reserve as well. The labor market remains very strong, so that's a positive point. There are some weaknesses, and we are sometimes hearing about potential or expected planned layoffs in certain companies. But overall, through June, through July, the labor market has been very strong. We continue to add, hundreds of thousands, around 400 or 500,000 jobs each month. The unemployment rate is down to 3.5%, so a very low unemployment rate. But despite that, consumer confidence is very low. It's the lowest we've seen in some time, and that's really driven by that high inflation. Consumers, individuals, we're working. Many people have even seen pay raises, but not to keep up with inflation. And so just the higher cost of goods is really drawing down consumer confidence. When consumer confidence is down, that can be a bad sign for future economic growth. If confidence is low, you might see consumers start spending less, investing less. We've seen that a little bit, but not a lot. There is a growing potential for an economic recession. The expectation for a recession sometime in the next year or so has increased lately. And we did see 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, which some say does represent a recession. However, when you look at the underlying numbers, we are still seeing growth in various sectors. We are still seeing consumers spend, although it has slowed a bit. And we still do have that very strong labor market. So with those factors, it's hard to say that we are in a recession now, but it's still there on the outlook. In addition to consumers feeling down, companies potentially laying off, another kind of concern that could cause a recession is that the Fed is tightening monetary policy. The Fed is aggressively trying to lower inflation. And whenever the Fed is trying to lower inflation, they're trying to tamper down growth, there's always the risk that they could put us into a recession. The Fed, of course, is very aware of this, and they're trying to have that balancing act of slowing down the economy, lowering inflation without putting us into a recession, although historically they haven't always been successful. The Fed is primarily trying to lower inflation by raising the Fed funds target rate. The Fed funds target rate is an overnight rate that the Fed sets, and they lowered that rate to 0% back in March of 2020, at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, in order to help the U.S. economy, to sustain it, while we were going through the issues that resulted from the pandemic. And then the Fed held that rate at 0% until just this year. But once inflation started to pick up last year, the Fed had to act. And so in March of 2022, the Fed raised that rate for the first time. As of June 30th, they had raised their rate 3 times, and it sat at 1.75%, so up quite a bit. As of today, after one more rate hike in July, we're now at a rate of about 2.5%. The Fed meets this week and is expected to raise rates again. As stated on this page, as of June, the market expected that target rate to reach around 3.75% by year end. So that would be several more rate hikes by the end of the year. The reason we always talk about the Fed rate hikes is that where the Fed funds target rate is set at really does impact the interest rates on the securities that we buy for the district's portfolio. And what we've seen here in 2022, as a result of the high inflation, the Fed activity, is that we've seen asset prices fall sharply. Asset prices both in the stock markets, I'm sure you're aware stock markets, have had a very rough year so far, but also in the bond markets. And the bond market, is where we invest the district funds. And in the bond markets, when prices fall, that means interest rates are rising. And I'll turn to the next page to talk more about rates so you can see here what I'm talking about. So this chart here shows you the U.S. Treasury yield curve, so interest rates on U.S. Treasury securities from 3 months out to 30 years, and at 3 points in time. So December 31st is that dotted line. That light blue line is March 31st, and then the dark blue line, June 30th. So the solid light blue to solid dark blue is the change over the quarter. And you can see interest rates moved higher across the yield curve. If you look at that last column in the table, you can see by how much those rates changed. And really, those shorter term securities, 3 months, 1 year, saw the biggest increases as they moved as the Fed raised that target rate. But the increases on the longer end, or 2 years and beyond, were fairly substantial as well. They weren't anything like we saw from December to March, that dotted line to the light blue line, where we saw interest rates move up very sharply, especially on that 5 years and under area. But they did still continue to move higher. And again, that is on the expectation that the Fed is going to continue raising interest rates. Just to update this, so since June 30th, interest rates have continued to move higher across the yield curve. The biggest increases have once again been on maturities of 2 years and under, those maturities that are most directly impacted by the Fed. And in fact, once you get beyond 2 years, the yield curve is slightly inverted. Right now, a 2-year Treasury is yielding more than a 5-year, more than a 10-year. The 30-year is yielding slightly more, but we do have a slightly inverted yield curve. And that's because the different sides of the curve are really dealing with two different mechanisms that are happening. On the short end, again, they're moving higher because the Fed is raising interest rates, while the longer end is more impacted by longer-term growth expectations, a slowdown is expected, and long-term inflation expectations, meaning the market thinks long-term, the Fed will get inflation under control. So we turn to the next page. I'll just show you total returns on various sectors where we invest the district funds. These are not the district returns. We'll get to those. And as a reminder, we show total returns. So this takes into account the realized earnings as well as the unrealized gains or losses. And so for the quarter ended June 30th, on the left-hand side, you can see that returns were negative for all the sectors in 1 to 5 year indices. And that means that the unrealized losses were greater than the realized earnings. And you may recall we saw the same thing last quarter. However, last quarter, those returns were much greater, around -3% just for the quarter, which was one of the worst, or was the worst quarterly performance in over 40 years, just because of that very large increase in interest rates. And so while interest rates did move again higher, not as much, so we still saw negative returns, just not as negative. You can also see here for the quarter that high quality corporate notes underperformed treasuries and agencies, so they had a lower return. And that's because yield spreads widened during the quarter. Interest rates rose on all of these sectors, but they rose more for corporate notes. And so that negatively impacts the market value. But as we'll talk about in a few pages, it does create a good buying opportunity for the portfolio. It means that when you buy new securities, you're getting them at much more attractive yields relative to U.S. Treasuries. And then finally on this page, we also show the 10-year return of these various indices. One, just to remind us all that, over the long term, we do historically have seen positive performance from fixed income securities. And not only that, but we see credit instruments, including corporate notes and asset-backed securities, have higher returns than treasuries and agencies. And this is again why we think a diversified portfolio that utilizes credit instruments is important to help the district's return over the longer term. I'll move into the portfolio here now. So here's a snapshot of the portfolio. The component of the portfolio that's managed by PFM excludes those overnight accounts, the cash accounts that Deb talked about, and it also excludes your bond proceeds, which is your main operating portfolio, so around $103 million invested. The portfolio's effective duration, which is similar to average maturity, was 2.25 at quarter end. And you can see it's quite a bit longer than the benchmark duration. As of June 30th, the benchmark on the portfolio is the 1 to 3 year Treasury index. But if you recall, last year it was decided to change that benchmark to the 1 to 5 year Treasury index. And so since that decision was made, we have been slowly extending the overall duration of the portfolio. It actually turned out to be a really good time as we've seen, interest rates move higher over the course of the past year, and it's possible we'll start to see interest rates fall next year. So I think, although we of course didn't try to time the market, I think it worked out to be good timing. And so that's why right now your duration is much longer than the benchmark duration. As of starting October 1st, the benchmark will change to that 1 to 5 year. And the effective duration of a 1 to 5 year index is around 2.5. So still a little bit short of that duration. The yield at cost on the portfolio, so the earnings rate, was 1.30% as of June 30th. This rate has been moving up quite a bit over the past couple of quarters, which is great. Essentially the earnings, the interest earnings on the portfolio. I'll note as of March 31st, the rate was 0.79%. So it moved up about 50 basis points over the last 3 months, which is great. And that's just a result, of the management of the portfolio, being able to buy these higher yielding securities that are now available. And again, great news for the portfolio and your future interest earnings. The portfolio is very high credit quality. You can see there the average rating AA. Majority of the securities are rated AA+. All the treasuries and agencies are rated AA+ by S&P, and that's what we're showing here. There are a few securities you can see here that are not rated by S&P or rated BBB+, but those securities all have an A or better rating from Moody's and or Fitch, and so in compliance with your policy and California government code. And then just finally on this page, the sector allocation here showing about half the portfolio in U.S. Treasuries, the safest, most liquid investment type, with the remainder really diversified among the other investment types. The next page shows the activity in the portfolio. So as Deb mentioned, there was an increase in Treasury holdings. You can see that was the sector where we purchased the most. The chart on the left shows the different sectors that there was activity in the portfolio. The gray bars are your sales and maturities, and the blue bars are the purchases. So you can see we increased the Treasury allocation by about $12 million. We were also, as I mentioned, able to add to the corporate and asset-backed sectors as those spreads widened. We found good value there, again, to safely add to those sectors to help over the long term increase the earnings and return potential on the portfolio. So now getting to the portfolio performance. So the chart on the top will correspond to the percentages on the bottom part of the table. So I'll just walk through the 3-month column here. So that's for the quarter ended June 30th. So when we look at total return, you have your interest earned, which will always be positive. And then you have your change in market value, which will be negative or positive depending on interest rates. Again, this is a quarter where we saw a negative change in market value, so unrealized market value losses due to the rise in interest rates. When you add those together, it was negative for the quarter. And then that corresponds to this minus 0.69% total return for the quarter. You can see the portfolio did underperform your benchmark, and that's really a result of that longer duration position. Longer strategies underperformed shorter strategies for the quarter. If we look at the return of the 1 to 5 year index, again, the benchmark that you're moving to, that had a return of minus 0.81%. So you did still do well relative to the longer benchmark. And then the 1 year number is also, still not a pretty number to look at. Your 1 year return number is really reflecting that first quarter data where we saw very large unrealized losses in the portfolio. But as we get out longer, which we like to do in a long-term strategy, a long-term portfolio, looking out 10 years, you can see the portfolio has earned 1.06% each year on average for positive dollar return of about $9 million. So good long-term performance, has done really well relative to the benchmark. This lastly, on this portfolio section here, I'm just showing your realized earnings on the portfolio for the past 3 months. Again, you have your interest earned. You do see for the past quarter and the past year, we have taken some realized losses in the portfolio. This happens when we sell a security that is yielding less than current market rates, which is the case for most of the securities that haven't been purchased in the last 6 months. But we do take that loss with the analysis that what we're buying at a much higher yield will result in increased earnings over the life of the security. And just finally here, the ESG review and analysis. Just a couple pages here to summarize what the ESG risk rating on the portfolio looks like. So just a reminder on this portfolio, treasuries and municipal obligations do not carry an ESG rating. And so we're looking at about 43% of the portfolio that does have an ESG risk rating. When we do measure the rating, though, we do exclude the federal agencies. So we're not looking at those when we measure the overall average of the portfolio. So this page here really has the information that you're looking for. And if we kind of focus on that top chart, we can see the overall average ESG risk rating was 21.5 as of June 30th. Still solidly or really in that lower medium category, essentially unchanged from last quarter. The lower the ESG risk rating, the better. The portfolio or the district's ESG criteria does require new purchases to be rated, have an ESG rating of 30 or less, so medium or lower. When we look at, up at the top here, the bars kind of with the individual issuer buckets that fall into, the issuer ESG risk rating ranges from 6.7, so in that negligible category, to 30.9. So the portfolio holds 2 securities that are just in that high category on the medium and that 29.9. So 2 securities in the high category. Securities that were purchased prior to the ESG criteria, going into place. But overall, good, solid ESG risk rating. The exposure score also essentially remained unchanged. The exposure score, essentially, it's the entire universe of risk that a company could be exposed to given the nature of their business. So before they try to manage that risk, it's kind of how much ESG risk are they facing. In this case, lower score the better, so still really solidly in that medium category. And then finally, the management pulling out, how well they're doing managing their risks. In this case, higher is better. And like last quarter, the portfolio remains in that strong category. So again, overall, a good solid score on the portfolio, still in that lower medium category. So that's the last page I was going to cover. There are quite a few more pages in the report, kind of informational, both on the ESG review, including kind of a glossary, as well as additional information on the holdings and trade activity in the portfolio. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions or comments of Allison by board members? And because we've got the screen still up, I can't see any board members. Oh, thank you.
Didn't disappear.
You're back. Any questions, comments?
No questions. Good report. Appreciate the information.
Yes, thank you very much, Allison. I had a couple just because. So on page 7, when we're talking about the market themes, and you mentioned the Federal Reserve is tightening monetary policy, I kind of get the first couple that they're doing rate hikes and things like that. And then the fourth one is there's the start of the balance sheet reduction paced to double beginning in September. What does that mean? What is double?
Yeah, sorry, I covered that. So the Fed essentially has 2 ways to control or try to control interest rates, and that is their Fed funds target rate, which kind of impacts interest rates on the shorter end of the yield curve, and then to impact interest rates on the longer end of the yield curve. They do that. One of the phrases you hear is quantitative easing by buying securities. They did this during the financial crisis. They did this in 2020. So the Fed was buying long-term treasuries and long-term federal agencies, essentially to put money out into the market and also to keep longer-term interest rates low, to encourage borrowing, to encourage spending. You might recall we saw mortgage rates move quite low during 2020. So since inflation, got as high as it did, in addition to raising their target rate, they stopped making purchases, and now they're trying to reduce their balance sheet. And the balance sheet, when they purchased all those securities, taking on debt, I think I got up to around $7 trillion, maybe even more. They're trying to reduce that balance sheet, so allowing securities to roll off and mature, sometimes selling securities. So that's what that means. And that's, again, to try to impact interest rates on the longer end of the yield curve.
All right, thank you. And then on page 12 on the portfolio activity, I understand. So we bought we spent extra $12.5 million on U.S. Treasuries, but I'm wondering, I don't know what federal agencies are, and we dumped $14.25 million on federal agencies. Can you define what federal agencies are?
Yeah, so federal agencies are debt that is issued by federal agencies. The most common ones that we utilize are debt issued by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Oh, okay.
And so that is an investment type. It's a very high quality investment type. Unlike treasuries, it's not guaranteed by the U.S. government. It doesn't have an explicit guarantee, but it's still seen as having an implicit guarantee. You may recall, again, back in the 2008 financial crisis following the housing bubble and all that, the government actually stepped in and said they were going to back all that debt. And so that's why it's considered to have an implicit bias. Again, so it's just debt issued by federal agencies. It usually carries the same credit rating as U.S. Treasuries. The reason you see the large decline is there really isn't any value in federal agencies. Federal agency yields are essentially the same as Treasuries, or sometimes they're offering less than U.S. Treasuries. in theory, they shouldn't. I mean, treasuries should really be the lowest yielding security because they are the safest, but they have not been. And so because of that, we've been selling some of the holdings of federal agencies to purchase treasuries or some of the credit sectors.
All right, thank you. So if there are no further questions, any comments from the public? I see no hands being raised. So our charge is to review the investment report, which we've done, and we have the opportunity to direct staff to prepare the information for acceptance by the full board of directors. Do I have a motion to do that?
So move.
We have a motion by Director Wieskamp, and I bet a second by Director Eccles. Oh, are you frozen, Elizabeth? Never mind. I'll second it. So now we need a roll call vote. Shannon.
Okay, Shannon Rice, Recording Secretary, taking roll call vote. Director Wieskamp,
Aye.
Director Waspy,
Aye.
and Director Eccles. I hope you are not frozen. I see that she dropped off, and I'm wondering if she is gonna hop back on.
I imagine she's trying to sign back on.
Disappearing
so.
people, God.
You know what? I'm going to use some executive privilege here because Elizabeth is the one that has to check out at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to suspend this vote. Is that, I don't know if that's legal, but I don't know. We're going to try it. Let's move on to the next thing. So we've got a 2-0 vote now. I bet we can do that. Allison, thank you very, very much for your report. And gosh, I hope things get better.
I like that. So does the president. I think he'd like that.
Anyway, our second item is the second quarter 2022 general fund and other governmental funds financial reports. Who's going to do that?
Michelle.
Okay.
Michelle, you're still on mute though. There you go.
Yeah, good afternoon. Michelle Strawson O'Hara, Assistant Finance Officer. And today I'm presenting to you the second quarter 2022 General Fund and Other Governmental Funds Financial Report. We'll start with an overview of the general fund revenue and expenditures for the first half of 2022. You can see that the actual revenues through June 30th were 90 million, or 47.4% of budget, which is as expected for this point of the year. Revenues are 7.1 million higher than prior year, primarily due to increases in property tax revenues and charges for services. Actual expenditures of 86.4 million were 44.9% of budget and 5.5 million lower than prior year, primarily due to a reduction in transfers out. Expenditures are on track to end the year well within the approved budgeted amount. When we drill down on the general fund, which is found on attachment A of the report, and this is on page 77 of your packet, it shows the details of the general fund revenue and expenditures by category and also by division. You'll see the notes at the bottom of the page where there are variances against budget of over or under 10%. The most significant percentage variances are in expenditures and relate to unexpended supplies, services, and capital outlay, which are all on track when encumbrances are included. Attachment B of the report summarizes all the other funds, the special revenue funds, which include our Measure FF CFD, lighting and landscaping districts and zones of benefits, our project funds, debt service funds, and internal service funds, which pay for the district-wide costs of workers' compensation, general liability insurance, major infrastructure and equipment, as well as employee benefit claims. That concludes my brief presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions, comments by board members? Hearing none, I'm very happy that we're on track. Deborah.
Thank you, Director Waspy. I don't see any questions from board members. It doesn't look like Director Eccles has been able to sign back on, but I wanted to just take a minute and embarrass Michelle because this is Michelle's last Finance Committee meeting with us.
Oh, my.
She's going to retire from the district and explore other options. So it has been fantastic working with Michelle over the last almost 6 years. And she has, as you can see from this presentation, commanded all of the financials of the district, and she will be very missed. But I also want to introduce, we have with us today Anna Huang. Anna, are you still on here? If you want to turn your camera on. And Anna is our foundation finance manager, and she has graciously accepted the acting position for Michelle while we undergo the recruitment for the position. So Anna has been shadowing Michelle and is going to take over during this gap until we find a new permanent assistant finance officer. So wanted to introduce you to Anna.
All right. Well, Michelle,
Okay.
happy trails to you, and we'll miss you and wish you the best.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your guidance and support over the years, and it's really been a pleasure serving you. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And
We
Anna,
will.
welcome.
I can tell Deborah's very sincere.
I'm going to miss Michelle a lot.
I'm sure she's glad for Anna stepping in.
Anna is going to be great. Yeah. So just wanted to point that out to you while Michelle was still on the screen. So
Right.
I think we need a action from the committee for this item.
Yes, this once again, we have the ability or the opportunity to recommend this to the full board of directors.
We'll surprise you by saying, let's recommend forward.
We have a motion and I'll second. Any further discussion by the public? Anyone? Hearing none, let's go with the roll call vote again.
So I have some good news. Director Eccles is back.
All right, disconnecting.
Is she
Great.
back?
So I'm happy to call roll call. I don't know the proper process, so
For this vote, I'll stumble over something and get the last one. I'll get
There she
the
is.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Shannon.
I'm having some internet issues today. I apologize.
Yeah. Shannon, if you want to just call the roll call on this item number 2, and then
Okay.
we can go back and have Elizabeth vote on item number 1.
okay. Shall we restate what we're voting on so Elizabeth can vote on that?
Sure.
Sure, we're
Okay,
voting on the second quarter 2022 general fund and other government funds financial reports, and we're forwarding them to the full board. And Shannon, I apologize if I stole your thunder there.
You're doing great. Thank you. Okay, this is Shannon Rice, recording secretary, taking roll call. Chair Waspy,
Aye.
Director Wieskamp,
Aye.
and Director Eccles.
Hi.
Thank you.
Great. And now, so Elizabeth, what happened was you fell off right before the
That really
vote.
sounds dangerous, doesn't it? She just fell off.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I would like to add my yes vote to the previous item as well. Yeah, and I've just taken myself off camera because I'm hoping that because the internet is unstable, I'm hoping that might help keep me on the call.
Excellent. Perfect.
Thank
That'll
you,
be good.
Director Eccles. I'm recording your vote for the previous recommendation.
Thank
Okay,
you.
and for the record, the first vote on the investment report was 3-0, and the second vote on the second quarter financial reports was 3-0 also. So now we'll move into one of my favorites, the 2022 internal audit mid-year report. And David, I welcome.
Thank you, sir. David Sumner, Internal Audit Manager, and you're already familiar with the work that I do and work that Internal Audit is in charge of performing. Let me share with you my screen. Hopefully it will go through easily. All right. Do you see the agenda item number 3? Good, thank you. Okay, so let's go. This is an information only item, so that there's no requirement for vote or anything. It's just for information. Internal audit performs an appraisal function and attest function and advisory service for the district. And we review financial transaction, cash handling practices, district funded grants, review concessionaire agreements and compliance of the concessionaires and grantees with the terms of the agreements that they have with the district. We are comprised of 2 full-time employees. Both of us are certified, and we have completed 9 audit projects since the beginning of the year. We have also reviewed 464 contracts, prepared annual financial report of the district to the state controller, that is something like a CAFR, if you will, and verified the district annual compensation report that again goes to the state controller's office. We have prepared a statistical section of the annual comprehensive financial report and reviewed financial viability of the prospective concessionaires and vendors. What happens for preparing or performing an audit basically is that on an annual basis, we perform a risk assessment, compile information from various segments of the district that have auditable activities and consider the risk and rank them. And then we prepare a list that we go through with general manager and AGMs and say, these are the things that we consider to be auditable and useful for the district to be reviewed. And then they approve of this. And then we prepare an annual audit plan and then connect with the entities that we are, or clients that we are going to be auditing them, and tell them this is the scope of the work we do, this is what we want to do, and if you have any concern, please let us know at this point to focus on the areas of your concern. And then we perform the field work, if you will, review records, and then prepare a discussion draft of the audit report. Go and discuss that with the responsible management personnel of the entity, and then get their response and prepare a final report and provide it to you and the rest of the people that are interested. So grants that were provided by the district and were received by the recipients were reviewed. As you know, district makes payment on an ongoing basis to the grantees. And then when they have reached the stage of completion, before they receive the last payment, they would have to provide adequate records for everything that they have done. And the records would be subject to a review by internal audit. And if everything is hunky-dory, then we will approve final reimbursement that the grantees would deserve. Fortunately, there was not an issue for the Measure WW grants that we had audited so far in this year. Then we have completed 4 audits of district activities. 3 of them are cash handling practices, and the 4th one is about the relationship of the payroll and human resources to make sure that the controls are in place and things doesn't go out of whack. So the first cash handling audit that we did was for Corey Lakes. The entity has been reviewed 3 times so far during my service here. And their controls, internal controls are functional. They did not have really significant issue with compliance, but there is room for improvement. Their cash handling were okay, but refunds and the voids that they had prepared, the documentations need some further improvement. Cashbacks that are the revenues that the entity collects were not picked up timely by public safety because they have more urgent and primary duties that they have to perform. So occasionally cashbacks are not picked up timely. And we have raised concern with regard to the safety of the staff that have safeguarding of assets that is in their disposal up until they are picked up, and also recognition of revenue timely. Because one of the ways of understanding if something goes wrong, basically, is management looking at the transactional activities for a specific months. And if they are not within the expectable range, then management would be alerted to ask for a review and research and find out why. And when revenues are not deposited to the bank timely, the management would be deprived, finance would be deprived from having this way of looking at transactions and measuring whether they are within the range, acceptable range or not. So that's one of the reasons, if you will, that finance is interested in having cash deposited into the bank timely. Roberts is another one of the cash collection sites that we have audited before. Overall, their internal controls were functional, but they had not fully complied with the financial policies and procedures. Fortunately, there has been a change in the supervisor position of the entity, and the new supervisor that is assigned to this park is quite capable and very eager to really comply with the requirements, if you will. So for Roberts, the issues were that the supervisor had not really reviewed the transactions fully. And as a result, when there was a changeover in the leadership of the park, most likely cash was not adequately counted to identify the shortage that existed in the place. And then the new supervisor had confirmed that I have received these funds while it was not existing in the vending machine that is at this park. So after we reviewed that, we recommended that she has to report this as a shortage, so it would be written off as a loss by finance, and replenishment occurs to bring her back to 1,300, which was the actual accountability for the site. And prior other recommendations were also not properly implemented at this site. One of the issues that we noticed in this park was a cashier very frequently would void transactions around closure of the time. And the reasoning for that was saying that there are some people who come into the park and take a look, and they say, no, we came to the wrong park, or our friends are not here, therefore we don't want to stay, and so on. And district as a customer service accepts this kind of activity. If somebody comes in and says, I want to leave, so long as it is within the 20 minutes, and then the cashier is allowed to refund the entrance fee to that person. And what we noted was sometimes the time between the acceptance of the cash and refund were in excess of the 20 minutes. And very frequently, cashier did not really have adequate documentation for the refunds. For receiving the refund, there needs to be a cash by the person that has received it. It has to go through the POS machine that they are using, and so on. Not just a writing by the cashier that I have refunded these, and that it wasn't just a past type of visit for the park. So we have alerted the new park supervisor, and she would be observant of these issues, and hopefully the matter would not be an ongoing issue further from that. So
David, I just wanted to ask a question. So I've had my kids at summer camp there. I wonder if people are coming in to pick up their kids and then asking for a refund. That would be interesting to find out if that was happening. They don't want to pay, the fee every single
Right.
day when they pick their kids up and they know if they get out in 20 minutes. That'd be interesting to just follow up on that and see if that's part of the
Actually,
situation.
actually, like
Because there's really no pickup or drop off area.
Right.
They'd have to come into the area. So,
when I have been at the kiosk doing cash bound or something, I have noticed that occasionally customers or visitors would stop by and they say, I want to do just a pickup, or I'm just looking at the thing, and cashiers as a customer service would say, yes, please go ahead, and then come back,
and then come back.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So there would be really not much of a formality of cash collection from the people
Right.
generally that would come to stop by to do just a short activity and leave. I have also noticed that in some parks, cashier gives a one-page thing to the person and says, okay, take this, and when you are coming back, just give this back to me, as this is a visitor's pass only. So I will inquire about this at Roberts, but
Okay.
I frankly have some doubt about that it has been cause of these weaknesses.
Right. We'll have to sell them a Regional Park Foundation membership so they don't have to worry. Okay. Thank you, David.
That's it, please. And then yeah, Don Castro. Don Castro again is one of the places that we had audited before, one more time before, and the issue with them at the past was that they did not have point of sales, cash registers. They did not have electricity at the kiosks, and they are using existing practices from years ago, that is issuing pre-printed, pre-numbered parking permits and pre-printed fishing permits and so on. And at the swim lagoon, they would be supplementing also as a control item wristbands of different colors, depending on the day of the week that people visit. They will change the color of the wristband and so on. So we had discussed these issues with them in the past, and they had taken action. Fortunately, the kiosk that is at the pool site currently is equipped with the point of sale system. So there is proper documentation of collection, if you will. And the kiosk of the entrance to the park has been equipped with a phone and a safe, a temporary safe, if you will, for the protection of the daily collections up until they are picked up and transferred to the park office. But beyond that, they have certain weaknesses that have been identified in the audit report, because people who visit the swim lagoon might need to use the bathroom that is outside the fenced area. So it is essential that they come and go. They need to have their wristband still, although the park is equipped with a point of sale cash register for the swim lagoon. So what we noted was they had not really keep track of the serial number of the swim wristbands, and since 2015 that we had audited, they have abandoned this practice. So there is no one-to-one parity between the cash collection activity and the wristbands that they issued. And the second thing that we saw as a weakness was the park entrance kiosk does not still have power, right? So they do not have a point of sale register, and then they issue the parking permits, but they really had not kept a log for 2018. So there is no certainty that all the collections were tracked and all that. And another problem that we noticed there was for the crowd control, they use these wristbands, but on the days that are weekend and holiday and the significant number of people would want to go to swim lagoon, they might not issue or follow the wristbands sequential numbers either. So that causes a problem. We appreciate the customer service they provide, but there really needs to be a point of sale into the in the entrance kiosk. There needs to be better documentation. There needs to be maintenance of the sequential integrity of the pre-printed records that they retain. So these are the things that needs to be done there.
And
So
David, can I add a little bit to that?
Yes.
So those are the 3 cash handling reports. And certainly at this park, Don Castro, it is very busy, and it still is, it has that manual system at the front kiosk. I just want to make sure the board's aware we have made a lot of progress on getting the technology to the kiosks. This is one that hasn't happened yet. I think we have a project for the parking lot at Don Castro that's been budgeted, and I'm not sure what the status is, but hopefully, and I'll talk to the project team, see if we can make sure we get power there so that we can have a cash register in that kiosk. That will help. And then when David goes out to all these sites, he does a lot of hands-on training, and we have so many new staff and we have so many new park supervisors. A lot of his time is spent educating them and explaining the importance of all these things so that they know why we're asking them to follow all these procedures. And we also have other members of the finance department that provide some additional training, the cash receipts team. And then we have our annual supervisor training that we offer and cash handling training. So we are really working hard with operations staff, and we've been meeting with Steve Castile a little bit more often to make sure that everyone understands these rules and to try to get the infrastructure that's necessary in place if it's missing. Director Wieskamp.
You know, I've attended a lot of these, and David, I think, does a meticulous job over the years, but it seems very, very difficult to establish something that's universal throughout the parks. Who does the bank deposits? Is that all individual?
David, do you want to answer that?
yes, it's different between different parks. If the park is in a secure location, safety is not an issue, then the individual park staff would be depositing the cashbacks to the bank. But
Okay.
majority of parks have a scheduled pickup date that is to be followed by the public safety, and they are equipped with a safe that after the cashiers drop the collected funds into that safe, only public safety staff would be able to pick it up. So public safety staff would go and pick up these and drop it into the bank. And it's at that point that the finance department would be recognizing them as revenue because they get reflected into the financial records of the bank and all that. And the bank statements would be reconciled to the.
I admire your tenacity, David, but it just seems with so much change of personnel, it's got to be very, very difficult to make it what we would like it to be, shall we say, but I admire everybody working hard to try to do it.
Yeah, in the past, also Park District has used a pickup logistic, cash pickup logistic company like Garda or Loomis, that they go and pick up these, but that is highly costly, and some of the locations that they have are not being served by them. So it would not be really economical to pick up the cash. What is happening that is basically our point of concern is that accumulation of the cash bags that are unpicked yet, it could create a problem for safeguarding, and also, the people that collect cash basically should have no further access beyond the day that they have been involved in. So, district has controls and measures that are really preventing that, but it doesn't mean that, a person could not, if they decide to, break the controls that are existing. We don't want that to happen. Fortunately, we have, frankly, trustworthy and reliable staff that basically they are eager to do their job properly and all that. So that's beneficial. But beyond that, we could not say that, honesty of a person is a control element and all that. Therefore, we can rely on it 100% or something. We want still to have establishment of accountability at point of collection. We want to have verifiable records. We want to have timely deposit. We want to have assurance that if something goes wrong, it can be, we can create who has committed potential wrong. At this point, within this part, we could not establish, we could not fix accountability because cashiers do not have individual accountability. Before we had discussed this with the park supervisor, he has come up with a new form, but the form that he has prepared does not really achieve. The second issue is he might not have time on a daily basis to review the cash collection reports. So, if something goes wrong, it would not be visible for a month or so for him. And after that, he could not fix the responsibility for anyone because individual cashiers do not maintain separate accountability, as I said. And, we don't want really to have a situation that if something goes wrong, everybody could be considered a suspect or everybody could be offended because of a secondary review or something like that. As I said, fortunately, we haven't had this kind of instances, but still we want to have assurance that everything is going well.
Well, I think the finance department keeps working on it. So we keep hoping things will get better. It's just difficult with so much change in personnel and so much variety of parks, but keep working at it.
Thank you.
So I had a follow-up question. So I think I heard you say, David, that in areas that are considered safe, the employees themselves take the cash bags to the bank. And so I'm just wondering whether you would want to have a universal policy where the money automatically goes into a safe and, then public safety comes and helps, get it to the bank, for all parks, because I think it's really hard to say, what's safe, what isn't. It's only safe until someone figures out what's going on and
Right. I believe that intention has been that we would have a uniform and universal policy for the entire district. But as I said, if you consider the volume of transaction and frequency of it, some parks like Kennedy Grove have very limited activity, right? So they are one of the parks that I know of that they deposit the cash collections themselves. But in other locations, volumes of the transaction and availability of the staff is really an issue. I believe that every park is equipped with a drop safe so that after the cashback is dropped in there, it would not be accessible to the individual employees, including the park supervisor, without the presence of a public safety officer. So
we can look at that.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about. I have a high faith in employees, and of course, it's always good to have some checks and balances. But I'm more concerned about a robbery of our employees.
Yes, exactly.
So
that's as well our concern. Yes.
We'll revisit that. We'll go ahead and look over the list, Director Eccles, and I think having a standard practice is a good idea.
Yeah, we have had only 2 instances that I know of during my service here that there has been breaking and cash was stolen from the park when the staff were not on duty during night or something. One was in Temescal and the other one was in Coyote Hills, I believe, that they had dismantled the cash collection machine. But operations department has taken action on this. The new Ventec machines that are being installed are collecting only credit card, accepting cash. That do not accept cash, they accept only credit card payments. So there would not be a likelihood of somebody coming and saying, I'm going to take a axe and cut the Ventec machine and take it with me or pull it away and all that. So that is solved. And in other parks, to reduce the likelihood of breaking and robbery and all that, we have a process in place that when it's not the season for the park activity, they would have to return the cash that they have, including the petty cash or a starting change fund, back to finance. And then at the start of the new season, they would be receiving it. Again, you know, in this park, in this park, the park supervisor had decided, I believe, that he doesn't want to return the starting change fund at the end of the season to the park district. And the reason for that was it takes me time to prepare the park for the start of the season. And then finance does not send me the check immediately. It takes a month after I ask for it. And then I do not have time to go to the bank and cash it. So I decided to retain the $500 starting change in my custody up until the next season. So we have raised basically a concern in that case also that, hey, this kind of things is, your park is a seasonal park, and these kind of things are really for the safety and safeguarding of the assets. So that was another thing that we noticed in this park. The last audit that was performed was a review of segregation of duties between the payroll and human resources. As you know, payroll basically is the most liquid form of cash disbursement, if you will, for the largest number of the people and so on. So for that reason, there has to be segregation of duties between the people who have access to set pay rates, access to have establish new employees, access to have terminate an employee, with those people who process the records, time cards, and arrange for the payment. So basically, nobody should be able to perform authorization, processing, and recording of transactions all by himself. These 3 types of activities would have to be segregated, and within the district, obviously, there has been segregation of duties. Like when a new employee is hired, only HR has the access and ability to create a new employee file so that that employee would be eligible to receive payment after they have performed work. And similarly, payroll is the only group that has access to time cards. And when employees turn in their time cards, they can process the time that is being reported as worked and cause creation of a check or a bank deposit for that particular employee and all that. So these issues has been a concern basically for every chief financial officer that the district has had. And at the request of Deborah, we got a hold of a person that is specializing in this kind of review, and I spent some a year or so searching for an entity that would accept this kind of assignment. And we also wanted to make sure that since everything is processed through computers, our computer controls are in place. So the objective of this audit was that the computer controls are in a way that if something goes wrong, there has to be a record of it, and we need to know whether something was improperly accessed or not. So we had this review performed, and it cost us $10,000. And the other entities that we have contacted had much higher price for performing such a review. So all in all, it turned out that there are a number of issues that would have to be fixed, but fortunately our access controls for the computers and the way that district finance system works does not allow really unauthorized access to a great deal of things that is being handled through payroll and HR. So the detail of the recommendations and all that is already in the brief that has been provided for you. I'm available if you have any questions with regard to any of this audit that has been performed.
Thank you, David. I did request that review of the segregation of duties between payroll and HR. Just we'd have, again, so much change and retirements in HR and changes in payroll. And we do have that report that gives some specific recommendations. And I've shared it with our AGM of Human Resources, Allison Cook, and she and I are going to meet and go through and see if we can make some improvements and, to segregation of duties and make sure that everything's in good order. So thank you for doing that, David. I think that's all you had today. Is that right? You want to drop the slides?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from board members?
Have we talked at all about a simple checklist for new employees that they could repeat over and over? Because sometimes if you have something there that you can't deviate from, it will help the whole process. Because you must have so many employees back and forth on this. I can picture the
Director Wieskamp, that's a great suggestion. We have many different checklists for different things, and payroll and HR meet regularly to confirm any new processes, any annual things that are going on. For instance, at the beginning of summer, when we have all this onboarding of the new employees, and we work very closely with lifeguard services and the fire department, and just try to make sure that everything is taken care of.
It's so hard with so much change in employees.
Yeah.
You keep at it though. More power to you.
Elizabeth?
Thanks to David.
Good, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I did want to just say, David, I really appreciate your work and your thoroughness, and I appreciate listening to your reports, and it's very important work you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless you. I appreciate the leadership and help and assistance that has been provided to me, and acceptance by the CFO when we come and say something is problematic and they immediately take action on it. I'm grateful for all the protection and the leadership that you have provided to Integral Audit. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would add my thanks, David. I think your department is incredibly valuable. The fact that we have the ability to do an internal audit like this, I think it keeps everybody on their toes. I think it's really wonderful, and you do a great job, and so does your staff. I would like to say one thing though, and it's snarky here, but I think it was 4 or 5 years ago I was on this committee and we did the same thing.
Yep.
And to suggest, well, I'm not going to say anything, but I think we need to solve the problem. I mean, did I read this correctly? That evidently, I'm quoting from the cash bag pickups at Quarry Lakes, evidently a total of 36 bags with $22,463 that was collected from June 23rd through August 22nd, 21, weren't picked up. So we've got $23,000 sitting in a safe. And I think that's scary, in my opinion. I think I don't see why we can't do that. I know everybody says they're busy, and I'm sure that everyone is busy, but I think this is a priority. I mean, we're sitting here,
Get a closer bank.
I don't know how many criminals read agenda packets from finance committee meetings at esoteric special districts, but this kind of tells me that, well, that was between August 22nd of last year. God, I missed an opportunity by 2 days and a year and 2 days, because I think that's worth it. I mean, I'm pontificating again, but I just read in the board packet yesterday that somebody stole 2 catalytic converters out of the parking lot of your headquarters there, and then the next day they did it again, got another one. So I mean, if a catalytic converter is appealing, I think $22,000 is appealing. And it seems like we do this. It seemed like that was a problem in each and every park that you audited. And it was the same problem that was 4 years ago. And I'm not going to question anybody's
honesty,
way they do business, but I really think this is an important thing that we ought to address. Because I mean, good Lord, we got kids out there, and those, by definition, you put a kiosk way far away from everybody else. It's at the front of the park where hardly anybody's there. You're alone. You're in a remote situation in some cases, and we put kids out there essentially. So
it's a safety issue for
we can look at it.
You're correct, Director Waspy. We will, at our next report, we're going to have something new to share with you about this process. You're right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I pontificated a little too much there, but Kelly, I see your hand up. What do you got?
Okay, well, first off, if you compare this with BART, at BART, they just put out a state auditor's report, or was it a newspaper report? No, a grand jury report that said that when the auditors go in at BART, the board of directors, the top management, and the unions were all conspiring together to refuse to talk to the auditors and not cooperate. So that was a little bit of a scandal.
Oh my goodness.
That was a little bit of a scandal. Over here, when you got the money not showing up from the $23,000 or whatever, well, that just means you need a little system like a computer, and you need to come up with some expected amounts of money that you expect to show up. And when zero shows up at the end of the month or the end of the quarter or at the end of the week, when you have $0 showing up, then your computer needs to go ding, 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 and you need to send out the police and go look for your money. If it says zero and you were expecting $23,000, that would be an automatic alarm. And then this is the internal audit report. Well, I've done my own little audit. I call it the aerial audit. And how do we do with aerial audits? Well, first of all, you have to look at the best practices. That's the Riverside Police Department with 2 helicopters that have been operated for 13 or 26 years, and they're operating their helicopters 600 hours a year in the air. 600 hours each helicopter in the air. And the Park District operates their helicopters for 230 hours each one in the air each year. So I think we need to reset. We need an aerial audit a real aerial audit, not mine, because you won't believe me. But go and reset your standards so that either get the helicopters up there more hours in the air, double them, or knock down your standards such as 230 hours is what you consider acceptable and normal. And then finally on the toilet audits. Just a week or two ago, this board approved toilets for Point Pinole. And now yesterday you turn around and you give some money from capital funding from WWD for what you call waterfront access at Point Pinole again. Now there's nothing wrong with toilets and waterfront access at Point Pinole, and spending capital money there is great. My question is, you wouldn't build a building and then say, okay, we're going to fund the toilets separately. And buildings hold people, and wherever you have people, you have toilets. That's the magic of human biology. And so if you have, like you're doing waterfront access designed for people and not dolphins or whales or birds or whatever, then you should have maybe this idea that you could fund the toilets out of the capital budget, out of WW, and put your capital budget to better use and put in the toilets there, instead of having this special toilet slush fund. Slush as in, slush is, that's a double entendre there. It's a toilet term. The slush fund that you're using to fund these things, that's at the control of some manager who decides where the toilet should be allocated. We need toilet standards, like we have for this. You just had a thing yesterday about all the different standards used for capital expenditures. Need a standard for the toilet expenditures, throw the toilets in with the capital expenditures, fund the toilets at the same time out of your capital budget, and free up some money for more toilets somewhere else that are not part of the slush fund. And of course, all of this stems from my personal experience at Mission Peak. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, if there are no other comments on this, that was an informational item. And David, thank you very much. It was very informational and I appreciate your work. And
May I
Kelly's work.
simply say, I look upon you as a persistent advocate to make things work properly. And that's hard to come by. So thank you very much.
God bless you. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the support. Thank you.
All right, our next item is the 2022-2023 tax levy for general obligation bonds, debt service, and assessed valuation update. Deb.
Dennis, can I interrupt for a second? Since
Sure.
So can we move agenda number 5 ahead of this one since it needs a recommendation?
Because it
'Cause
needs a
I know,
recommendation.
yeah, because I know.
Excellent idea.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to
Connie.
agenda item number 5, the strategic information technology plan request for proposal and RFP. David.
Thank you, directors. I'm David Rusting. I am the Chief Information Officer for the district. In about 4 days, I'll be here for about 6 months so far, and it's been a great experience so far. And I'd like to talk to you today about our strategic RFP recommendation. So I'm going to present that here for you and pull it up. I apologize. It was right in front of me, and it just
it's just
like
part of
all
the meeting.
technology, right? It's just wonderful. I had it already ready for you. So I apologize.
Oh, don't apologize.
It will not show up on my screen, and so here it is. I will get to it as soon as I can. It's always fun when your CIO can't get their screen presentation up there.
No pressure. No
I
pressure,
have
David.
no idea why it's not showing up on the screen as I share with you.
You must have done something evil. It's coming back.
I was I could make
There
all-
we go.
Oh, there we go. Yay. So I appreciate your patience on it. So agenda item 5, strategic IT plan request, our RFP recommendation. So part of the goal of information services is to proactively support the digital services for the Park District. This includes everything: networks, computers, hardware, software, data. And we really need to do that in a resilient and responsive manner, and also very cost effective. So in support of this goal, we put together a request for proposal from qualified firms to provide a 5-year strategic IT plan that will assess our current state and makes recommendations of where we need to go and the priority of those things. This RFP was put together using various proposals from other municipalities and park districts, some of our own RFPs, as well as some experience I have doing strategic IT plans. It was reviewed by our CFO, internal audit, and legal, who made some good recommendations. We issued it on May 23rd, and we had responses due by July 1st. We received 4 proposals. The deliverables that will come out of this is a comprehensive assessment of the Park District's existing IT environment, including human capital, meaning the resources and people that do things, as well as identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities for us to improve things. And once that's complete, there'll be a summary of findings, prioritize recommendations, because there's never enough time and money to do everything, so you have to prioritize, and the supporting documentation and a proposed project plan by priority with timelines and cost estimates. When we went through this process, we get the panel that reviewed them were from representatives from all the many divisions: public safety, operations, human resources, ASD, and FMS. We've got them together. We reviewed them and ranked based on the criteria that was in the RFP. And then we had 2 firms that we interviewed. We did reference checks, and we have a recommendation to make to the board. Based on our interviews of the top 2 firms, and the consensus was the RFP award should go to client first at a cost of $99,935. This recommendation, we'd like to have that submitted to the board of directors at the September 6th meeting. And if this is approved, we expect to start sometime in October, and the completion would be sometime in February. And that, I'm trying to be respectful of the time for Director Eccles, is the short version. I'm glad to take any questions from you.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments by board members?
I think one question you may have is what was the range of prices that came in? And the top 2 were about the exact same price. They were all at $99,000. There might have been another firm that maybe didn't have a lot of resources that was around 85. Is that right, David? But they all came in very close to that same range. So it was really a tough decision based on a couple of firms that were very highly qualified that we made this choice.
Yeah, I would just note that the firm that provided the $85,000 quote also had an additional charge for the cybersecurity portion. So it basically, when you added that in, it was $99,935 or $87. So it's within a couple $100.
Right under 100,000 based on.
Yeah, I think our these
yeah.
firms understand the district.
Member Eccles.
Yeah, well, I was just going to add that, yes, that's a nice problem to have if you have several good candidates all coming in around the same price. And I also just wanted to say that I'm very supportive of the strategic information technology plan and really doing some work around this. And so I'm glad you're moving forward with it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We look forward to giving you some interim results as the project progresses.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, David, thank you for your report, and hope you're enjoying the district. I'm really all in favor of this. I love it. I think it's a great idea. I was dumbfounded, or surprised, let's say, but we've got approximately 1,200 computers in the Park District. I would hope that when in the deliverables or the scope of service, when the section that says assess customer needs by meeting with all levels of management and their key technology customers, do we really need 1,200 is my question when we have 780 permanent employees. And I say that out of just a question. If we want to right size, I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, I think there's always a good observation around what is a computer that is kind of assigned to a single person they use on a daily basis, and what are shared computers that may sit at a park office and be used by multiple folks, or special purpose computers that are set up for specific applications. So this will absolutely be something we look into.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Unless there's, well, let's get a motion in a second. This is a recommendation, so we need to recommend it to the full board. Do I have a recommendation? Or
Sure.
Motion, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by anybody, members of the public, staff, anybody? Hearing none. Shannon, will you take a roll?
Yep, Shannon Rice, recording secretary, taking roll call vote. Director Eccles,
Aye.
Director Wieskamp,
Aye.
and Director Wasby.
Aye. Motion
Thank
passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your report, David, and good luck.
Oh.
So I think we can squeeze this in. Our next item is the, or we'll move back to the 2022-2023 tax levy for general obligation bonds, debt service, and assessed valuation update. Deb.
All right, this is Deb Spalding, Assistant Finance Officer again. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so this item is to review the calculation of the 22-23 tax levy for our Measure WW general obligation bonds. And so yesterday, the Board of Directors approved the resolution that will allow us to levy this tax, to send the information to the 2 counties. And normally we are getting that approval earlier in August, and then we bring you the calculation once we have the final assessed value information from the 2 counties, which we do now. And so this year's levy will be $5.80 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. And just for comparison's sake, last year's levy was $2 per 100,000 of AV. So we have made a promise to voters with Measure WW and earlier than that with Measure AA that we would keep that tax levy below $10 per 100,000 AV. And we have done that every year except once in 2008 when we had just issued our Measure WW bonds and there was a huge drop in assessed valuation. So while we do our best to maintain that $10 per 100,000 of AV, we have to make those debt service payments. So it could happen, but it is very, very, very rare when that does happen. And assessed value has actually grown so much in the last few years that it would be even harder today for us to cross that threshold. Moving on. So how does that play out in reality? So this is kind of looking at a worst case scenario with like the most expensive houses. So from the California Association of Realtors, this is the median sale price. So this is like homes that were just sold in June. So in Alameda County, 1.4 million. So for a $1.4 million house, that tax levy would be $82.36. And then a new home in Contra Costa County is a little bit less, 976,000. So that tax levy also would be a little bit less, $56.66. So again, that's for say the sale price of a home. So the average assessed value of a home would be much lower than that. So I'm just giving you sort of the worst case scenario here, just to give you a sense of what your constituents are paying for the tax levy. So bringing it full circle, this actually circles us back to the first item I talked to you about, our investment report. So the tax levy amount, so we send that data to the two counties, they then put it on the property tax bills, and those funds are remitted to us along with our other property tax payments, and that allows us to make our debt service payments. So if you were to look back at that table on page 3, you can see here's where we have a separate account set up where we're collecting the debt service funds, and we accrue it there until we have payments due, and they're due in September and March. And now just a little bit on assessed valuation. So we've gotten the data now from the two counties, and it's coming in at about 8% in both of the two counties, an 8% increase, which is very, very strong. So 7.97% in Alameda County and 7.79% in Contra Costa County. Those rates we're able to use to project our property tax revenues for the, well, we then know the property tax revenue increase for the second half of this year and for the first half of 2023. And then we use Beacon Economics to give us a projection for the second half of 2023. And you may already have seen there's headlines out there about assessed valuation is starting to slow down and home prices are starting to slow down. So that we will not see that 8% again. It's going to be lower, and we'll provide you with that report in September, but very strong for this current year. And this was just an informational item, so stop sharing and take questions.
Any questions, comments?
Nope. Straightforward.
No, very straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you,
for the
Deb.
report.
Thank you for keeping it under that promised limit that we promised. I appreciate that. So anyway, that was informational. And we are seemingly done with most of our business. Our next item is public comments. Any public comments? Hearing none. Any committee member comments?
A busy meeting as usual.
Gee,
Yeah,
Christmas.
covered a lot of ground. Thanks, everybody, for the reports and
Thank
for your
you all
work.
very much. Yeah, thank you very much. And Michelle, we'll miss you. Happy trails. Have a great life. Take care. We are adjourned.
And David, I'm glad you're enjoying your job.
Yes.
Thank you.